Now, everything old is new again. America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
We must ask ourselves, are we truly alone, or are we being lied to?
They've reopened the X-Files.
Welcome to Everything Old is New Again. This is Douglas Viviani with the rather inquisitive David Cohen.
Yes, I have one eyebrow raised.
Because that is a trailer for the new X-Files 6-episode miniseries.
Yes.
That Fox has released, and they've brought back David Duchovny, Gillian Anderson, and Chris Carter's hit from the past, right?
Right.
It's perfect for Everything Old is New Again.
Exactly.
Because this series from, I believe it was 1993 to 2002, 9 years, 202 episodes.
It's a lot.
Is back.
Couple of movies, yeah.
Yeah, a couple of movies, you're right.
I saw David Duchovny in the emergency room in Lenox Hill Hospital. I could talk about that later.
Oh, you talk about it now. What did he do?
Really?
Yeah.
My son was really sick. We were sitting in this emergency room for hours. Everybody's hacking and coughing and sneezing. And David Duchovny walks in with his daughter, who I guess had the sniffles, and he goes right in. And there was a collective groan that went up from the rest of us. Peons in the emergency room, like, figures. But he just, hey, David, come on in.
Well, they might have been afraid of him because if you remember, back this series went 9 years. Series 7, there was after 7 or around Series 7, there was a lawsuit. David Duchovny sued Fox for selling the rights to the affiliates for the rerun of X-Files. He said they didn't get enough money from the affiliates, and therefore the money that percentage he was to get was too small. He settled for $20 million and decided to come back after a 2-year absence, basically, from the show. That's why he wasn't on the show.
Right.
So I'm not trying to whatever.
Well, that's probably why he probably gave $10 million to Lenox Hill Hospital, and they let him right in.
Exactly.
So, all right.
Listen, that's an unsolved mystery that will remain unsolved. But they go into UFOs. There's also Monster of the Week stories that we can't get enough of with this series, right? They influence other forms of entertainment. Some of the stories might have been based on reality. We'll investigate that. There was that movie in 1998 during the run of the X-Files.
Of the show, right.
5 years in, they did a movie. Think about it. And continued the series.
Continued from the movie, right.
So that was called Fight for the Future, or Fight the Future, I think it was. And it's $198 million they earned for that. So they've got 62 Emmy nominations, 16 Emmys won. I don't know. What is this show all about?
Yeah, for those of you who don't know what the X-Files were, and my son, who's a teenager, they're available on Netflix now, and he's actually on his own, without hearing me talk about it, has gone back and started watching it, and he loves it. So it's sort of timeless. But basically, it's two FBI agents, right? Fox Mulder and Dana Scully, and Mulder investigates paranormal activity, that kind of thing. And they assigned Agent Scully, who's more of the science, the brain behind, what's happening, to disprove whatever Mulder finds. So that's how it starts out. She's like his watchdog as he's chasing, aliens and ghosts and all this stuff that just can't be explained. And that's the premise of the show.
And part of his character is described clearly. If you ever watch the show, they do this every so often. You'll see him in the bowels of he's in the basement. His office is in the basement.
Yeah, they keep him in the worst part of the building.
And by himself, Right. And behind him is a poster that says, "I want to believe," and it's got a UFO on it.
Yeah.
So that defines his character, I think, right there. Let's listen to Chris Carter, who's just now getting out and talking about the new series and what it's all about.
As you see, we raised questions about the myth arc. We knew we were only doing 6 episodes, and so when I decided I was going to bookend the show with mythology episodes, that left 4 to do. Luckily, I had 3 really excellent writers from the beginning of the show to come back and do it.
Now, if you don't know, this is a little bit of an awkward thing. If someone has not seen the show yet, there are 2 things going on in the show. One they call a myth arc, and one is Monster of the Week. So what he's talking about there for these 6 shows, the myth arc, and of course all those 202 episodes previously in the two movies, there's an underlying theme, an underlying story that's continuing throughout the episode, sort of like Lost, and certainly this series has influenced Lost, where there's something going on in each individual episode with a beginning, middle, and end with a question mark. And then, in addition to that, there's this underlying current where all of a sudden you'll see episodes of UFOs. And are the UFOs and what's going on? Does that make sense?
Yes.
So there's,
right.
As a avid watcher, you're familiar with that term, myth arc?
Yes.
Okay, so how
Absolutely.
did you become, just from being a fan, people have talked about it?
Just reading about it, basically.
They don't say it on the show.
No, they don't say it on the show.
But it is something that's been done now since then.
Right.
The downside of that people say is they never got to a conclusion on this.
No. The whole premise was, in a nutshell, it's about extraterrestrials, a plan to take over Earth. And so that's sort of the myth, the running theme throughout the entire
and every so
series.
often you'll see episodes about
just about that, right?
But bear in mind,
there are episodes in and of themselves which have nothing to do with that, where they're, like you were saying, the monster of the week, whatever, paranormal weird thing that's happening. One episode will just address that and conclude it.
Right. And so,
question mark, like you said before, right?
Right, because a lot of times it's there's a little teaser at the end of the episode where whatever they just resolved is not exactly always resolved as you think.
Right.
If that makes sense. Sort of a Twilight Zone-ish or whatever. Which it borrows from a little bit. And we'll talk about that. But I want to just go to, if you're a new audience member, never seen the show before, you've heard that there'll be 6 episodes. The middle 4 is Monster of the Week. The 2, beginning and the end, the 2 bookends are this mythology. They're going to talk about UFO. Let's hear again Chris Carter, the creator of this, talk about if you're a new member.
Really through a historical document, a file, if you will, of who Mulder and Scully are, what they've been through. And we take you, I believe, through a primer of what the X-Files is and who Mulder and Scully are. So I think for a new audience, I think the show is accessible, but we really made it for the hardcore fans.
Right, and they're back because of the fans. Right. Clearly, the fans have been around.
You could sum up where the series left off in a minute or two. It's really not difficult, and to set up what their characters are, you could do that pretty quickly.
And he's going to try to give us a little piece of that right now, just a little peek under the covers, so to speak, as to what's going on in this clip.
It'll probably start on a Friday. What will seem like an attack on America by terrorists or Russia. Driven by a well-oiled, well-armed, and multinational group of elites using alien technology that government's been hiding for 70 years. Like yourself, I'm a true believer. What I need is your expertise.
And then we're going to hear Chris Carter real quick. Why they're coming back. What's it all about?
The X-Files is really back as a result of its fans. We wouldn't be coming back without them.
They're basically saying the fans brought the show back. It's about the fans, and it's going to be fun.
Nothing about the money they're going to make off it. Right. That's not the reason. It's the fans.
And that's okay. I mean, because it's all about dollars and cents anyway. The question is, if these 6 episodes do well, then what's going to happen?
Right.
It's open. Duchovny has said he's open to coming back, and Gillian Anderson has as well. So we'll come back ourselves. Cool. Nothing to do with money whatsoever, just the love of radio and bringing you everything old is new again. Now, are you psyched to see this, or where do you stand on this?
No, I definitely am. It was a great show, and I'm really glad that they decided to come back, Gillian Anderson and David Duchovny. Yeah, you don't get that very much, right? I mean, some of these old shows that you loved from whenever, the 70s, the 80s, even the 90s, right, that you wish you'd see them again just to catch up with the characters, right? And 9 times out of 10, it's just never going to happen. So that's why I'm excited for more than anything else.
But also think about it. He kind of said it. The creator clearly is there.
Chris Carter, yeah.
The 2 actors that were the leads look basically the same too, by the way. A little age, but they kind of look really good. They look good. And this 2002, that's 13 years ago. People change a little bit. Right. The characters do change. The company talks about that a little bit. Or they do change where they're coming from and what's happening a little bit. The chemistry's still there. And the writers I don't know if I cut the clip out or not. I can't remember. But the writers, of
I didn't know that
writers,
part. Yeah, I did not know that.
And there are some episodes that are really big episodes for fans that love the show, and that will see writers of the best episodes. Clearly, that's a great way to go. But I mean, who's to say that you're able to do that?
Yeah.
Columbo came back. They didn't have any of the original writers, and the show was not nearly as good as it was.
Right.
Same actors, and so forth. But when you get the same writers, you're going to do pretty well. I think.
Definitely. And I think they did 6 because they want to see how it goes. I mean, why spend all that money on 13 episodes or 18, whatever a full season is, if you're really not sure what the reception is
going to be on, I believe, Sunday nights. I'm guessing on this. I should know, but I believe Sunday nights, which is, I think, a prime time. People don't want to go to work the next day. Something to escape. It could be fun.
Get abducted by an alien on a Sunday night. It's cool. Yeah.
No work the next day. It's a
good excuse.
You're listening to Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show, with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Look, Herb, there were 2 Martians by the ship. Look how little they are.
Just like in the comic strips. Well, we'll welcome them to planet Earth.
Ahoy, Martians! Well, maybe their standards of beauty aren't as high as ours.
Everything Old is New Again's back with the Munsters and Grandpa Hal Lewis.
What does the Munsters have to do with the X-Files?
I just thought it was great to put in a reference of the Munsters. We had talked about Frankenstein and did 2 shows on that a couple of episodes ago.
Right.
And now we're bringing him into and being our representative. Frankenstein and Dracula are our representatives of humanity and in a first contact situation with a UFO. I just thought that was very X-File-ish.
I see.
So we were going to be talking and continuing about the X-Files.
Okay.
Hey, some things work, some things don't work. What am I going to tell you? What I'm going to tell you is this: the idea is that...
Don't get me wrong. I always like to hear the Munsters. You don't really need a reason to put them in.
Thank you. They said the word UFO, and we're talking about the X-Files, and that's
there you go.
But more specifically, we're talking about the X-Files. Now, for a few minutes here, talk about the myth arc. And where did it come from? We haven't done the history a little bit yet of this show. It has clearly been based upon some other shows and entertainment prior, and we're going to dive into that now. One such show is Project UFO. Is only on 2 years, 78, 79, and it starred Jack Webb from Dragnet, but it's tease as to how things started with X-Files and the UFO aspect of their show and their myth arc.
These are unidentified flying objects that people say they are seeing now. Are they proof that we are being visited by civilizations from other stars? Or just what are they? The United States Air Force began an investigation of this high strangeness in a search for the truth. What you are about to see is part of that 20-year search.
That's the high strangeness, he calls it, is kind of the myth arc of X-Files. And that's interesting because that's based allegedly upon a real investigation, Project Blue Book. They call it UFO in the show, but it's Project Blue Book in the 60s, where the government and the Air Force tried to find out what's going on with all these UFO sightings. And we've done shows on that. If you want to take a look at that and listen to that, it's on everythingoldisnewagain.biz, everythingoldisnewagain.biz. You can look up our old shows. But because we rolled our sleeves up a couple of times and talked about UFOs. But now in the myth arc of X-Files, they're going to expose us to a new theory, something brand new that's happening about UFOs. Do you have any clue? Have you heard anything about this?
No, I haven't. I haven't. I mean, in the show, if you remember, Fox Mulder was abducted and, left for a season,
right?
For whatever reason, and then at the end, found proof that there was some government cover up and had to go on the lam because they tried to kill him.
But also the end of the season of 9, they eliminated that group that was covering up.
Right.
Was dismantled.
Exactly.
So therefore, in theory, that should have led the floodgates open to this information about UFOs.
Right. So I can't see how they could not follow up on that storyline, but I just don't know.
I'm surprised they're just doing 2 shows on it as out of the 6.
Yeah,
I would have thought maybe 3, whatever. I mean, it's. But where can they go with it? We'll
because
find out.
I think there's going to be more. That's why I think they're not going to resolve it in 6 shows.
Right. Well, we're also going to now turn to. They also do 4 shows on Monster of the Week.
Yep.
And I think that clearly was a homage when they did that to a show that wasn't so successful but still remembered, called Kolchak the Night Stalker. You remember that show?
Sure, yeah.
And this is back in 1974, and I remember 74, 75. My parents would go out on a Friday night. You're a kid of you can't drive or anything,
right.
But you could be left alone. I don't know, 12. My brother was 14, thereabouts, right? And you'd throw in a frozen pizza, which was brand new. There was no such thing back in the day. It just started. You threw that into the no microwave, by the way, into the toaster oven. Let's just hear a little commercial for our favorite.
What's the best part of McCain-Elio Square Pizza?
Quite definitely, the upper left quadrant is best.
Every part of McCain-Elio's is the best part, because it's just like it's cut from the best part of the pizza, the middle.
It oozes with sauce and yummy cheese. Of course, we all know the best bite is right here.
So you get more of the stuff you love, no matter where you bite it. Elio's. Every bite's the best.
Elio's Pizza. I don't know if anybody even remembers that. It's just
I remember eating it in college a lot. But at least your parents left you something. We got like a bag of potato chips or something.
Nothing. Not even peanut butter and jelly. Nothing.
No.
Yeah, I know you didn't even make your fluff and nutters on Saturday afternoons. You didn't do that.
No.
So what'd you do?
We just scrounged around. Maybe there were some frozen dinners in there or something, but usually it would just be potato chips, and we'd sit in front of the TV.
That frozen pizza, we'd have a little I guess it was what's it called, high C,
or Hawaiian Punch.
Hawaiian Punch, and we would tune in to Kolchak the Night Stalker. Man, what a night! It was tremendous. Remember this?
Yeah.
Listen, he did his commentary. It was tremendous. We can listen to the commentary.
My proof was gone, but that doesn't mean my story was false. Quite the contrary. Item: Francois Edmonds, the deceased, was buried a 3rd time at public expense. A 3rd time. However, this time, rock salt was poured in his mouth, and his lips were sewn shut. City officials will deny this, but you can see it for yourself if you'd care to venture out to St. Lucie Cemetery. Be my guest. If you got the nerve.
This guy, I don't know. You get a flavor or not with that clip? Do you?
I think you do.
It was so great. He was a reporter in Chicago. His bend was, I want to talk, the same thing as Mulder, right? He was looking at the paranormal. He was exposed to, vampires. He was exposed to robots. He was exposed to UFOs. That was about a zombie, that particular episode.
Yeah.
He'd have this little Instamatic camera. Remember, there were no cell phones, all that stuff. This little Instamatic, which had to be developed. So they would, at the time, they
had to develop the film.
Right. So they would pull the film out of it. The FBI or somebody would pull the film out of it to ruin his proof of what's going on. He'd get arrested sometimes. He was a scutch. Do you remember who that actor was? Darren McGavin?
Darren something.
Darren McGavin. Believe it or not, that his show was only on for 20 episodes.
Yeah, it was very short.
But it gave birth to Robert Zemeckis from Back to the Future, Bob Gale from Christmas Story, David Chase from The Sopranos, all served as writers or editors on that show. And if you don't remember the Christmas Story
the snap of a few sparks, a quick whiff of ozone, and the lamp blazed forth in unparalleled glory.
Oh, look at that! When you look at that, isn't that glorious? It's indescribably beautiful. It reminds me of the 4th of July. Turn off all the lights. I want to see what it looks like in the street.
And if you remember that from Christmas Story.
Yeah. You're really going off on a tangent here.
Have to go on a tangent because I love Darren McGavin better. I love Christmas Story, and all of it because of Gene Shepard, really. Gene Shepard's the one that wrote and narrated Christmas Story. He was on the radio in the 70s. He was a raconteur. He would sit for an hour and just tell stories. like Christmas Story, and as a kid or as in the army, or he would reflect and look upon the culture of the day, pop culture, and dive into the Beatles and why they're popular and so forth. If you get a chance, his shows are on the internet. You can listen. He really influenced me a lot. Just so throwing it out there. So it's a reference back to Kolchak, which is a reference back to
what were we talking about? Oh, the X-Files. Yes,
exactly. In fact, there's a hardware store in Northport, my new hometown. I used to live in Huntington.
Wait, let me guess. This has nothing to do with the X-Files.
It does a little bit, because what happens is that lamp. If you know Christmas Story, the leg lamp? Lamp of a leg.
Right.
Every day, every year, the day after Thanksgiving, there's a ceremony where in front of a hardware store owned by the mayor of the town, it's a small little town, will light that lamp in the window of the hardware store, and it brings in hundreds of people to take a look at that. And that's reference back to Darren McGavin, who is the star of Kolchak and was the foundation for the X-Files.
Okay.
How do you like that? So if it wasn't for that lamp,
there'd be no X-Files. Even though the X-Files came before the lamp.
No, the X-Files came after the lamp.
When was
the lamp? Was
Christmas
83.
Story was 1983.
83. X-Files in 92.
Right.
I stand on my theme that Kolchak is responsible.
You stand correct. Right.
Thank you, sir, for the X-Files. Not to mention that lamp in Christmas Story. We'll be right back.
We're going to talk about the X-Files at all?
Hey, Charlie, why the arm in the sling?
Yeah, I walked straight into that busted street sign in front of Frank's Automat.
Well, you must have been really sore at him.
You said it, pal. I said, say, what's the big idea of making a fella trip out there? I was going to sock him right in the kisser.
He's all wet. Why, you ought to sue him, Charlie.
I have half a mind to do just that. But where am I going to get that kind of dough?
Say, I know a fella just got me out of a big jam, and he didn't break the bank.
You don't say.
Yeah, the law office of Douglas Viviani.
The law office of Douglas Viviani?
That's right, the law office of Douglas Viviani.
Viviani.
That's what I said, Viviani.
He a straight shooter?
He's a cat's meow.
He's on the up and up?
Doug's ace is with me.
Is that so?
He's a bee's knees.
Well, that's just swell. You have his number?
You can call him at 631-681-1910 or email him at vivianilaw.com.
Wait, what was that last part?
What, email?
Yeah, what's email?
vivianilaw.com.
Now, back to America's entertainment pop culture talk show. Everything old is new again, with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Welcome back to Everything Old is New Again. We are investigating the investigation of the X-Files. We're investigating the investigators on the X-Files. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, we're investigating the investigators that are portrayed in the X-Files.
Exactly. Is it fact or is it fiction? Before we get to that.
No, it's fact that's what we're doing.
It's fact.
Oh, I see.
And it's also fact that the show is back. Gillian Anderson's got a little piece of the pie.
I can imagine what that must be like as a fan. You see these familiar faces and the familiar cross beams of light coming out of the darkness and hear that soundtrack. I knew that there was a big interest from the fans to see more monster stuff.
We are playing with this mythology in a whole new way, and the government's secreting of evidence about extraterrestrials might come into play.
Psyched yet? I mean, she's talking about the Monster of the Week. Chris Carter, thereafter, talking about the mythos, or the myth arc, whichever they want to say. And the X-Files are back. I think you might be more enthusiastic, apparently, than the stars of the show. Yeah. You sound so deadpan, you know? Well, Chris Carter sounds excited, but she's like, I can imagine the fans.
Yeah.
Like, are you excited? Like, you're in it. Does that make sense? I don't know. Let's take a look, though, and see, because that's a fact that show is back, at least for 6 episodes, possibly more if you, the fan, listen. Talk about Gillian Anderson. I want to throw something out at you. She was not the first choice to be on this show. Who do you think was the first choice?
Oh, I knew this. It was a blonde.
Pamela Sue Anderson.
Wow, that would have been
the Baywatch. Can you imagine? What a flop, I think, with all due respect to her, what a flop this show would have been.
Well, and Gillian Anderson didn't fit the type that they were looking for, but Chris Carter liked her, and that was it.
Yeah, and she was only 24 when they started.
Yeah, and she didn't have a lot of professional experience.
Not at all. But she really, they pulled the gun, and she responded very well with this. I also would suggest that this is a show that's influenced a little bit by the Twilight Zone.
You unlock this door with the key of imagination. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of sound. A dimension of sight. A dimension of mind. You're moving into a land of both shadow and substance, of things and ideas. You've just crossed over into the Twilight Zone.
Now, it's not really Twilight Zone, but it does deal with the unexplained.
Yes, absolutely.
So it has an influence, not just from Kolchak, but Twilight Zone and Monster of the Week. Sometimes Twilight Zones had that. Let's just play the Twilight Zone theme under a discussion that I want to have of the actual episodes of X-Files that may very well have been influenced by real life.
Right.
First of which is, and if you're not a fan, you don't have to memorize the name or the title of the particular episode, but it's called Nisi 731. It's a two-part episode where the it looks at the unit of the Japanese Imperial Army in World War II that the creator Carter felt was right for stories because that Japanese Imperial Army unit 731 experimented on humans during the wartime. They were not tried for any war crimes because the experimentation that they did and the torture upon all of these parties was used for research by the U.S. Biological Warfare Program. So they weren't exposed, but that did exist, and that episode explores that.
Right. Well, there's another one, too, where there was an episode called the Erlenmeyer Flask where this doctor collapses and the paramedics put a needle in him to decompress his chest, and some poisonous gas comes out and overwhelms everybody in the room. There was a similar case, not as severe, around that time where some woman came into some ER room in California. When they drew her blood, apparently there was this like strong smell of ammonia with like these manila-colored particles floating in it. Anyway, overwhelmed everybody in the room. Nobody died in real life. A lot of people fainted. They thought she was taking some sort of poisonous substance at home, which then came out, but they never really knew.
Like a home remedy.
It was a home remedy, but they never proved it, so it was sort of like this mystery.
Right, but sometimes, you can take a thought and just go one step beyond, and I think that's what he does, with these shows. And there's another one called Space with the series creator. Again, Chris Carter wanted to write an episode, or this particular episode, after seeing news reports about the face of Mars. You've probably seen it now. You see that face on Mars itself, the close-up, and he wanted to explore that. There was some things that happened negatively, as a result of that on the show itself. They used a lot of NASA stock footage and capitalized on the disappearance of the Mars Observer, which did happen for a while around the time of the show's production. So that human face was murderous in the episode. In real life, not so much.
Right.
It was fun to explore.
Yeah,
real stuff.
And here's another one that it must have had something to do with a real life incident. The episode was called Blood, and if you're a fan or if you weren't, basically there was this experimental drug they were using, but it was a toxin, and it caused people to see these messages on digital displays. Remember, this show was in the 90s, so the digital displays could be like, a clock or something like that. But it would basically tell you, it would spell out like, kill people, kill them all, something like that. And one in the show, this guy, former postal worker, of course, always a postal worker, climbs to the top of this clock tower on a college campus and basically is about to start a mass shooting. Luckily, Mulder saves the day. And in real life, what happened was that, and again, this was dated about 20 years before the show, but there was an ex-postal worker that went up to a clock tower and shot 40 people. Right. And they found a brain tumor that might have led to some like evil thoughts he said he was having in his head. Maybe not.
And there's the episode.
Right.
Now let's take a look quickly. You have 2 minutes here to go into a couple of stories of real life exposition of stories here that I would suggest might be good ripe for the X-Files. In 1978 in Australia, a gentleman was flying a plane, 20-year-old pilot Frederick Valetich, and he radioed back to Melbourne air traffic control. There's a long metallic unidentified object with 4 bright lights, which at times moves at high speed and orbits above his plane. 37 years later, there was still no trace of this individual. He had said right before he disappeared, they're coming for me right now, hovering on top of me. The oceans were explored and intensively searched, found nothing. There's nothing at all where this guy went. Witnesses report seeing white and green lights right before it happened. Dave, you have another one.
Cool. Yeah. This happened in 1950 in Times Square. This guy dressed in like this Victoria-era garb appears out of nowhere, looks startled. This is based on witnesses that saw it. Gets hit and killed by a car, right? And they found in his pocket this like mint condition currency from the 1870s, business card for an address on Fifth Avenue, all this stuff, but they have no idea where he came from, no record of it other than his name. And anyway, they go back to his son's wife, right? And the wife says, yes, my husband's dad, who could have been this guy, went out for a stroll sometime in the 1800s at a very young age, never came back.
At 29, yeah.
At 29, declared dead.
Well, he had the proof. He had the documentation on the body.
On his body.
Of old clothes, old coins, and so forth.
Should have been a show.
Should have been a show. Maybe it will be. Who knows? So we'll come on back to continue to discuss the X-Files' influence on culture and entertainment today. Listen to this from Fringe, a little foreshadowing. Everything old is new again. I wanted to just go through one of these stories. It's sort of similar to yours, but this is a gentleman by the name of Count de Saint-Germain. He basically is a real person, a historical figure, born in the late 1800s and officially died in 1783, maybe about 190 years old. But at that point, he was rumored to have been seen 100 years later in 1983, and at that point was only a 45-year-old well-dressed man. Odd to say, he was an accomplished individual, spoke 12 languages. He was chosen as an official representative of the Freemasons, so he was a real person. And in 1970, he was on French television. There was a gentleman by the name of Richard Chanfrey. And Chanfrey said he was this guy, later committed suicide in 1983, leaving no note. But his physical description, I have a physical painting portrait of him originally, and he met the same description. Odd, but possibly true. Who knows?
Should have been a show.
Should have been a show. Another thing, I want to talk about the Apollo 16. They just had found off of the moon, the lunar crash site for the Apollo 16. They call it a booster rocket that was jettisoned back in the day. They couldn't find it, and there it is. There's a clear picture of it now. So all those goofs out there that say that did we not land on the moon, you've heard those conspiracies.
Sure,
right?
yeah.
I'm sorry, that's completely false, and you could see from this picture the debris that we had left on the moon. I'm sure you could find, of course, the flag and everything else.
Oh, but it was planted there, Doug. It was planted. They never actually landed on it.
There's no moon, no wind on the moon, so the flag shouldn't be moving.
It's graphics that
we'll be back
stuff
to
they do in the movies
X-Files instead of this nonsense.
This is Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Favorite of the new monsters? I would say in Darren Morgan's episode, the Were-Lizard.
David Duchovny showing us all his enthusiasm for the X-Files.
Yeah, then it's a were-lizard.
So funny. They came on our late night show, which we do every so often, which is called Never Too Late. We would have to honestly and truthfully attack either Duchovny or Gillian Anderson.
We should have
for
them
their
on.
lack of enthusiasm.
Yeah.
For this
Well, you
project.
should have them on. I'm not on that show.
You're not on the show, although you did a valiant effort on our best
To try to get on.
Yes, and
But I didn't.
Well, you never know. The door is always open.
Mm-hmm.
There are always possibilities. That's what Mr. Spock would say. There's a reference.
There's a Star Trek.
So now, let's take a look at the influence on pop culture today that Fringe has. And I want to... Fringe has, hello?
X-Files.
X-Files has. And I would suggest the next evolution of the X-Files is and was Fringe. I don't know if you ever saw the show. It's a trailer, just to give you a smidge about what it was like.
I've been trained for a lot. Hostage crises, chemical attacks. What I've been seeing recently, I'm scared. I just want to go back to before.
I don't think you can.
All right, now that's Fringe. To give you a little idea of what that is Fringe, again, is another FBI agent, female agent, who is coupled with an individual that is running from the law, a very creative mind, that is a Mulder type. He's open to the paranormal. And his dad is a very ingenious scientist that when you get involved in any of these events that are paranormal, the dad is able to, and he's hired by the FBI to do this, to roll up his sleeves and try to figure out the scientific explanation of what's going on. So you have the little extra element that X-Files kind of has, but not really, because here we've got a make-believe, of course, but you've got a real life in the show scientist that is trying to explain away what's going on, or at least explain what's going on. They do touch upon a lot of monsters of the week. They also have a myth arc, which was a parallel universe. The interesting thing is that this, his name is, the father, I don't want to get into too many details. The father, though, that character lost his son at an early age. And rather than remain silent and not do anything about that, he used his skills as a scientist to find out that there is another parallel universe. He broke through the parallel universe, stole his child from the parallel universe, and brought him back. And again,
but Fox Mulder, one of the things that it inspires him on the show is that when they were younger, his sister was abducted by an alien. So that kind of set him on his career path.
Okay, this is as if the sister came back now, let's say.
Right.
Right. But it's the same
motivation, right?
But in this case, the father's that one, and the son that comes back doesn't know, because he brought him back at a young age, doesn't know that he should be in another parallel universe.
Right.
And now, because someone from a parallel universe is here, that's upsetting the parallel universe.
Yes.
And the ripples of time and the ripples of events of someone being there that shouldn't, and so forth. So it's got time travel, it has Monsters of the Week, and it has a myth arc of what's going on with this parallel universe. So it's a really intelligent, well-written show that I think is the... it's not the predecessor. What do you call it? It's the next show after the X-Files.
Influenced by
the evolution.
So back to the X-Files.
Yes, we are not going to talk about the X-Files until we talk about J.J. Abrams, the creator of Fringe.
Fringe is my favorite kind of show because it takes people that you really like, that you really care about, that you want to be with and work with and know, and it puts them into the scariest situations you've ever seen in your life, and allows there to be this kind of safety and comedy in the face of utter terror.
So now there's a little different element there, too, that the X-Files I don't think has. You tell me. I've seen the X-Files for sure, but not as many as you have. Is there an element of humor there? It's kind of self-deprecating against Duchovny's character and you're nuts kind of a thing. But other than that, is there any real humor or quips going on?
A little bit.
Yeah.
But definitely not a major part of the show, no.
Right. Which, is characteristic of the shows. You can't put it down, but to me, there's always a little bit of a smile once in a while. People trying to put each other's day, and it never happens there. They're so deadpan. They're so downtrodden,
Yeah.
almost like the Peanuts we were talking about. To me, Duchovny and Gillian Anderson, they got the weight of the world on their shoulders, and I guess they kind of do. But man, it's a little bit of a downer. Like it's constantly struggling. I'm struggling. There's never any like achievement or high point. Or not? You tell me.
I would say that there's definitely moments of like aha, or where they feel like they've accomplished something. Yeah, okay. I mean, but it's
and they have a smile and a beer and have fun?
No, but so
no,
it's not a lighthearted show if that's what you mean,
right? But even coincidentally, even to end an episode or whatever, there's not any quips.
No,
it's all right, but it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Occasionally,
they take it seriously. Let's take a look at X-Files and how it has.
Oh, good. We're going to talk about the X-Files.
Yes,
great.
I know that you have one. You're dying to talk about an influence that the X-Files has on Breaking Bad, right?
Yeah, well, actually, believe it or not, and I didn't know this until you pointed it out, Doug, but if you're a big fan of Breaking Bad, and of course you know the actor who goes by the name of Bryan Cranston, he actually was cast in an episode of The X-Files years and years and years ago. And Vince Gilligan, now Vince Gilligan is the creator of Breaking Bad, was a writer for the X-Files, and Vince Gilligan was really impressed by Bryan Cranston's minor role in one of the episodes, so much so that years later, when he did Breaking Bad, Vince Gilligan, he remembered Bryan Cranston, and he cast him as Walter White.
And thereafter, he became an actor, the star of the most recent Godzilla incarnation.
Correct.
Just a little
but it was also, he was on that sitcom, You're Not the Boss of Me,
Yes, yeah. And Julianne Moore would not have been in Hannibal at all had it not been for the X-Files. What happened basically was, the Jodie Foster role in Silence of the Lambs and the sequel as Clarice was a huge influence upon what's her name? Gillian Anderson, right?
Right.
And Gillian Anderson was to be cast during the X-Files as Jodie Foster's character, Clarice, right, in Hannibal. However, because she was on X-Files, she couldn't do it. And they then cast instead Julianne Moore.
That's really
interesting.
Cool. Malcolm in the Middle, Bryan Cranston.
There you go. Oh, that's right. Yes.
Including, and on Seinfeld.
Still on
Remember,
now,
he was a
isn't it?
dentist on Seinfeld, the anti-dentite.
Yes. All right. Any other influences you got?
Yeah, we came up with one more. At the time the X-Files was on, it was the 90s, and the internet was sort of in its nascent stage. But the X-Files is credited as one of the first TV shows where an online community developed. Now it's a given. You go online, you chat with other fans of the show. So there's episode recaps. Every website has one. But this was the first show where fans started communicating with each other, and the show itself, producers of the show were on that site as well. Took some ideas from the fans. It was interactive. And there was at least one instance where a diehard fan who unfortunately had passed away, her name was used as a character in one of the X-Files episodes as sort of an homage to her. So that was kind of neat.
Wow, pretty cool. Let's do an homage here to Leonard Nimoy on Fringe.
I know you have good reason not to trust me, but I'm afraid you're going to have to. Walter is in trouble, and I'm quite confident we don't have much time. What is William Bell really up to? What are his real intentions? Can we trust him? We have to find out. We will find out. I hope we'll find out. I think we'll find out.
There you go, the Leonard
Have
Nimoy.
you seen the X-Files, Doug? We're back to Fringe. What do we? I mean, an hour's gone by. We haven't talked about one episode of
because I
the
think
X-Files.
Fringe is a better show. By far. And there might be a Fringe movie, and I'm pushing for that by far. And because the characters are so much more played out, so much more they're more developed, they're more 3D, they're more fun.
So let's do a show on Fringe. Why are you cramming it into
We will do a show on
X-Files?
Fringe. If they ever come back with a movie, in the meantime, we are going to say goodnight and goodbye. And thank you, Leonard Nimoy, for making an appearance to introduce Fringe to us. And at this point in time, we are going to say thank you for listening to The X-Files.
Also known as Fringe.
To explore
Listen to that,
strange new world.
Come on back to Everything Old is New again next week.
Let's do a show on the X-Files. That'd be cool.
And new civilizations.
Fringe.
To boldly go
There we go. And I just wanted to also indicate that as far as Star Trek is concerned, we all should be aware that there's been an announcement that Star Trek, there was going to be a brand new series in 2017 for Star Trek. I don't know the name of what it's going to be yet, but J.J. Abrams' ex-partner, who is also involved with Fringe, by the way, both of them were, Alex Kurtzman, is going to be the executive producer of Star Trek, a new series that's unnamed yet, that will be on CBS All Access, a new kind of a Netflix type of channel and service, if you will. So I don't know if you're excited about that or not, but I am. Is our ever-present Star Trek.
What a great X-Files show we just did.
These are the continuing voyages.
Come on back, everybody's do again. Next
Enterprise. Your ongoing mission
fun
to explore strange